Good evening, it's Randolph Waite here with a new series of discussions. And up for tonight's show, we have a special request. This is from last year. This is a lady who wrote to us asking for another show dedicated to the problem of spilling things and what to do when the item has been spilled over. So what we're going to do tonight, having looked at that and really gathering some other listeners' correspondence all together, what we've decided to do is look at the situation when you spill, lentils, split lentils, or your broth mixture, for your soup. If you get that on the floor, it's going to be a problem, isn't it? Obviously, everything costs money, and so you don't want things to go to waste, and we don't want you taking out the dustpan and brush and trying to sweep up the lentils or the broth mix. And therefore, what we're suggesting on the show this evening is the picking them up individually from the floor and dusting them down before putting them back in the container or pot, whatever suits you as an individual. As I say, it's Randolph Waite. We've not been with you for a wee while. We had a pretty good series last year, and we're going back a little bit later this year, just the way the festive period, ended up coming through. It's quite a long Christmas, New Year period for most people, I'm sure you'll agree. And we're back with you this evening, Saturday, our usual slot, 8 o'clock. It's the end of January, so apologies if you've missed us, but we're back and ready and up and running to go. So as I say, tonight's show is going to be about spillages, and we've decided we'll go with the one on the spilt broth mixture. What we're looking at the moment is the container size. What we have here, don't know if you'll be able to pick this up in the microphone, but we've got a big container here of lentils and broth mixed together. It's in I'd say that's in a 5 litre storage tub. And it's it's certainly more than 50% full. So what happens here is it can be one of two things. You go to refill the broth mix with the lentils, you place that in, and you go to snap that shut, and of course you turn it upside down to get the mixture to go through together, and the lid's not been on properly, and before you know it, you've got your lentils and broth, and, barley and split peas all over the floor. It's at this stage that we are going to concentrate on what to do. So if you can imagine the scenario, this has occurred in your own kitchen, and everywhere that eye sees, there's going to be some pulses or some dry grain lying on the floor. I've talked often about my cat Middles, and if Middles was in the house, definitely not a fan of broth mix. I can assure you of that. But that's not to say that if you've got a parakeet or something of that nature, they'll want to maybe float down, have a little inspection, and potentially nip off some of the lentils. Who's to say? Or if you've got a dog in the property, just use the dog example, who's maybe been out scraping in the garden for its bone, comes back in with muddy paws straight on top of your split peas and pearl barley. I couldn't imagine anything worse. So we've got the kind of picture painted for you, I'm sure. And what we're going to do now is just run through the process of picking the individual bits and bobs up. So if you can imagine the pedal barley, I've got some here in my hand. It's probably about 0.2 millimeters wide and probably about the same dimension, the same length and dimension. And if you've got about 250,000 of these on the floor, then obviously you've got a bigger than 5 litre tub. But if you've got several thousand, lying all around about, the best way we found is to stick to the one grain per pick. So don't try to get your hands down and try and pick everything up at once. It's just not going to happen, I'm afraid. What we suggest is go for something less colourful to begin with. The pedal barley is ideal because it's a kind of off-white colour, almost mustard colour in appearance, depending how long it's been in the store. But the pea and the yellow split pea, the green split pea, and the lentils, these are slightly brighter coloured, and of course, once the pedal barley has been taken away, there's a lot less to focus on, and you've got the colour scheme to assist. The problem, of course, being is one, if you're colour blind, that's not going to help too much. But it certainly, if you've got a very, very colourful vinyl or linoleum, for that matter, on your kitchen flooring, on your kitchen floor, that's certainly not going to help. So it's really thinking about that too. Have you got a sunset type colour on your vinyl? Hope not, but everyone to their own choice. But if you've got something like a slate grey, or maybe perhaps a dark blue tile, that type of thing, then you're in business. Bob's your uncle, as they say. As I say, there's going to be quite a bit of discussion on this tonight. We'll be expecting some of the callers, listeners, to give us a call with any ideas and suggestions from their end. We always welcome that. The new show will be running, I should have said earlier, it will be 8 slots again in this season. So lots to look forward to. There's a whole range of subjects that we're going to try and cover. What we're going to do this year, though, and this is what we kind of hinted at the end of the last season, that we're going to try and amalgamate different subjects within the same show to try and cover as much ground as possible. So what I've done already while I'm sitting chatting here, there was about 6 or 7 split lentils had ended up on the studio floor. Now, the dark colour on the studio floor has obviously assisted me. While I've been chatting, I've managed to stretch down, and I've managed to pick up each of these lentils without much difficulty, I have to say. It didn't take me ever so long either. So I've now got 6 split lentils, and if the whole tub had gone overboard, and we were looking here in the studio, for example, of having about 8 to 10,000 lentils scattered around. Obviously, it would take a bit longer to get things organised. But what I'm very happy to say is, if we give a figure of looking at that tub, let's just say there was 2,500 lentils in there. We are now 6 nearer the total amount. So what did we say there? 2,500. So we're 2,994 to go if I'd spilt the lot down there. That's just an example I'd like to give. So we'll crack on here. We're going to pause actually for the news. We're going to take a little break while we get the news transmission, get that out of the way, and then we'll come back and we'll move on with the tonight's show. And as I say, if we get some more listener involvement, things are looking quite good as far as, and quite exciting actually, because as the suggestion that came through from the original listener on this one, I think it was prompted because she'd dropped a whole load of macaroni, dried macaroni, when she went to speak to a couple of people who had come to her back door, and I think they're possibly Jehovah's Witnesses or something. I'm not quite sure, but she'd opened the door and got a bit of a fright and dropped the top of dry macaroni, and most of it ended up in the garden patio. Actually, we just got a little red flag from the producer to get a move on here, but the news is ticking towards us. But what I was going to say, the Jehovah's Witness people turned out to be very nice indeed. They picked up, I believe, there's 700 pieces of macaroni they managed to gather off the patio. It was never going to be utilised. I think one had a slug or something on it, but with that kind of kindness and generosity still around, it's nice. People can be so pleasant in this day and age. We're going to break for the news. It's coming, and a very warm welcome back to this evening's show. You're with Randolph Waite on the discussions programme. Tonight we're talking about broth and the potential hazards when transferring broth mixture from a container into a pot. And what we're actually focusing on this evening is the hazard if it develops where it then becomes a loss, i.e. the broth mixture or split lentils for that matter, yellow peas, green peas, whatever you've got in the container ends up on the floor. We're focusing on how we gather the broth mixture and get it back into its original container, and without using any form of brush or shovel or indeed any utensil other than picking up one piece at a time. That's what we were looking at. That's what we're discussing. The phones have been extremely busy during the news bulletin, so we've got quite a lot to go on with. I have been reprimanded by the producer. I'll just take a step back. I did mention about colour blindness. Of course, we don't mention colour blindness nowadays, so I do apologise. It is now termed as colour vision deficiencies. My apologies to anybody. It's colour vision deficiency, and that doesn't mean that you entirely cannot see colours. It's just some people are affected by what colours they can or cannot see. So that's all that is. So just to get that little bit mentioned, the producer was giving me a kind of strange look, and I didn't understand why. I thought I'd maybe drop more than the 6 lentils that I'd managed to retrieve from the studio floor, but it turns out it was much more serious than that. So I'm glad I've set the record straight there. We've also been taking these calls I mentioned. One gentleman called in to say that his problem quite often is each time he opens up the package of flour when he's hoping to make scones or something, he lifts the flour from the larder, forgetting that he had put it in upside down the previous time, and of course when he comes to take it out, all the flour is everywhere, And that is that's sad to hear that story, because there's nothing worse than getting yourself motivated to make a cake or some scones or bread, and then find that your main ingredient is everywhere else except in the oven. We also had another caller who suggested, well, it wasn't so much a suggestion, it was actually based on her own experience, fed up with the same problem occurring regarding purchasing replacement bags and sacks of broth mixture. It's just the way they come. There's nothing any of us can do about it. We can't buy it by the sackful. But what this particular listener was telling us is that she has a special vacuum for those moments. I can't give you the make of the vacuum cleaner, but if I can say it's one of those orange ones, it's a very bright orange coloured, and you have to stoop over quite awkwardly to halt about the room. It's quite heavy as well, and it makes a lot of noise, if that helps, and it helps distinguish the make and model. In fact, there's so much noise that you can't even hear your stereo system when it's at full blast because of this busy and noisy vacuum cleaner. Anyway, the vacuum cleaner that she mentioned, she has a special one that she keeps in place in one of the hall cupboards, and as soon as she drops the broth mix on the kitchen floor, she dashes through, grabs this monstrous orange machine, hauls that back to the kitchen, and gets all the implements out. I think she's got another spare room for the rest of the implements for this machine, but she gets them all together, and she whizzes up all the lentils and the broth mixture and the pearl barley too, and then from the orange container of this machine, she's then able to scoop it back into the container, and likewise, strangely, she has also got a 5 litre food storage container, like we were talking about here in the studio. So they must be quite popular. Maybe there was a sale on somewhere and everybody dashed for them at the same time. I know that we've had one in the studio here. There used to be one for coffee, and there used to be one for tea bags, but there's not so much caffeine addicts left, and therefore we don't seem to find purpose for having the coffee or tea bags stored in these types of container units. And in case any listeners are confused what we mean, it's a type of Tupperware. I don't know if you were a fan of Tupperware during the 1970s in its heyday. I certainly remember lots of people from the older generation at the time, that's the females, gathering for these Tupperware parties, and I think they were Tupperware parties, I hope so anyway, but they were very, very prevalent during the 1970s, and lots of people used to sort of stop in the street and chit-chat to each other about the size of the tub that they got from the previous party, that type of thing. What we're looking at just now as well, and thanks for these callers with the little messages and words of advice from their own experience. I'm not sure if many of our listeners will uptake that offer of getting themselves a completely brand new vacuum cleaner, a secondary vacuum cleaner for that purpose, but it's a great idea and probably something I wish I'd thought of myself. Moving forward, I'm just getting some guidance here from the producer as we speak. Yeah, what we're going to do, in case any of the listeners that have just joined us are unawares of exactly what we're up to, I'm going to give it a little shake again of the Tupperware here. In that Tupperware, we've got about I think we calculated, rough calculation, it's a round figure of 2,500 pieces of broth mixture, which is made up of a combination of red lentils, split red lentils, green split peas, yellow split peas, and some dried, it looks very much like some dried veg, and of course the all-important pearl barley. The pearl barley is quite small. I mean, I've seen bigger. You think you've got to buy the pearl barley actually on its own to get the size, the basically the cream of the crop. But if you get barley in other broth mixtures, it tends to be a smaller variety. I don't know why that is. Perhaps it's oatmeal and it's not barley at all. I just don't know. Looking at the whole mixture here together, I don't know why they call it red lentils, because it certainly isn't red. It looks more orange colour to me. But certainly red lentils is what's on all the packaging. So maybe somebody needs to address that at the production line before they start their distribution of the lentils to the general public. We are going to stop again for a little bit of music. I'm being guided that we'll stop for the music and we'll be back with you shortly. That was Stay by Jackson Browne from 1978. Fantastic piece of music, that. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Tonight we're talking about spillages of broth mix on the kitchen floor. It's a special request from one of the listeners who wrote in after the last series when we touched on something similar. And tonight we've been talking for quite a good while now on the subject on how to clear up the mess without utensils, talking about sweeping brush and dustpan, for example. So what we had suggested was a picking process where you, what we kind of looked at, our advice was, if you can start with the pearl barley, and if you've got several thousand of these on the floor, just do it methodically. Don't try to pick all at once, one by one. And remember to have a clean cloth with you, a dry cloth, of course, and give each little piece of barley a little dust down before popping it back into its original container or Tupperware, whatever you've got. The leguminous, the lentils, like the peas and the yellow peas, split peas, that is, the green split peas, or whole peas maybe, and certainly the red split lentils will have to be picked up later. So what you've got to try and do is avoid any crush marks with your knees or indeed your feet. And so what we suggest is if you start from the furthest part out, generally when something falls and scatters, you've got a radius of the furthest point out from where the force would eject, and in this instance we're talking about broth mix. They would travel at some speed, and it depends how much broth mix was in the upturned Tupperware tub when it fell. It could have been just simply opening the packaging, and the packaging is split down and it's just fallen onto maybe a work ledge and scattered, maybe at the base of the washing machine or something like that. And that's all fair enough. But if it's been a major disaster, you've gone to shake through the lentils with the rest of the barley and broth mix in an upturned 5 litre plastic tub, and the lids come off, and you've got the whole lot on the floor. Really, it's you're going to be hoping it's a Sunday morning when it happens. That's the truth of the matter. But don't fret, don't get upset, and certainly don't turn to the drink over this one. It's something which is manageable, and as I say, if you start from the outer edge and work your way in a very methodic fashion, just picking up the grains of pearl barley first of all, and give them a quick dust down into the pot or into the container, whatever you prefer, and then move in slowly, and before you know it, you'll have gained quite a bit of ground cover across the vinyl on your floor, or if it's wooden floor, parquet flooring, or perhaps you've got stone tiles, who knows, but just take your time. There is going to be some obvious losers here. I mean, if there's any gaps in the skirting board, lucky old mouse, I say. It's probably goodbye to the lentil that's gone underneath the skirting board, unless of course you've got a partner who's maybe a handyman or even a carpenter, and you decide to dismantle the skirting to make access to pick up any lost pieces of lentil or pearl barley which has escaped under the floorboards or through the retaining wall or something. The idea is not to get a filthy brush and sweep anything. That really is just not going to help matters. It's going to cause problems down the line. So if you heed our advice and do what we're saying, just take your time and move in slowly. You'll find that if you've followed these instructions, you'll eventually get to the point where the main bulk of the grain or broth mix has collapsed onto the floor surface. And when you reach that point, I mean, really you should be singing some praises, because most of the work's done. The hard part is then over. All you've maybe got to do is concentrate on getting the rest up. As I say, by this time, I'm rather hoping at least you've kind of got some sort of rhythm in your action, picking and dusting, and popping into the container as you move through. And by the time you reach the main bulk area, you should be in a position where you can get these little speckles of pearl barley, lentils, and other split varieties into the container with a quick dusting, all within a jiffy. And if there's any losses which have to be calculated into the monthly shopping bill, then absorb it. Don't hit the sherry. Don't what's the old saying? Don't cry over spilt milk. Well, in this occasion, don't cry over spilt lentils. The problem that you may have is obviously you've maybe set some time aside to make a pot of lentil soup or broth. That may well have to take secondary place, and it'll be on the back burner for another day. Or if it's just been a shopping excursion, you've come back and as I say, you've inadvertently lifted one of the plastic casings, and who knows, maybe your nails are requiring to be manicured or something, and you've pierced the plastic poker in the lentil pack, and they've split, and maybe that's why they call them split lentils. Maybe they should call them spilt lentils, because it happens to so many people so often. There's a emergency line that we've got, though. We're going to set this up on this one. It's not something we'd normally look to do, but we'll give a number at the end of the end of the show. It'll be on our message board at least for a month, and if you want to call us if you've got any emergencies regarding spilt broth in your your hands are your head in your hands in despair. We're here to help. What not to do is get yourself in such a state after finding you've made a loss on the flooring, and just give up. You don't want to be doing that. Just take a few deep breaths. Realize what's occurred's occurred, and there's nothing you can do about it. And start afresh, a clean slate, and just get it all off the floor and into a container or into the pot. As the caller was talking about, or at least we mentioned of one of the callers previously, in regards to the macaroni which had to be discarded. Remember, we're talking about the very kind couple, or the two individuals who were potentially representing the Jehovah's Witnesses that arrived on the lady's back doorstep or back kitchen door or something, and she got a bit of a fright, and she spilt all the macaroni. Most of it ended up in the patio outside. The situation on that occasion with the retrieve, what was the figure they gave us? I believe it was 700 pieces in all were collected from the immediate area, and that was all discarded, and that was probably unnecessary. I know there was some discussion about snails and slugs being part of the equation, but to discard all that, I would have imagined if I had been in that scenario. I'm looking at the producer and he's nodding his head too. Yeah, we would have at least salvaged about 680 pieces of the macaroni on that occasion. But we were not there. We were not the ones that were in shock or upset, and therefore every case on its own merit. Now the weather forecast is due up now for transmission, so we're going to once again make that break, and we'll come back very shortly for a further update. Thank you. And once again, a very warm welcome back to the show. Just pause there for the weather forecast transmission. If you've just joined us, well, where have you been? We're almost out of time for this evening. Really just a bit of an update on the story so far. We've been discussing spillages of broth, and we've kept that spillage purely for the kitchen flooring, but it's not always the case where spillages of that nature take place in such a convenient floor space like your kitchen. If for example, you've maybe come through the property, your own house, and maybe to go and answer the telephone, you're carrying a bag of lentils, and we did say at the beginning of the show that we would touch on other subjects, and so let's just say it was a bag of rice, and you inadvertently tripped or something like that, and just trying to paint the picture here for you, and the lentils or the rice went absolutely everywhere, across the carpet, across the flooring, maybe down the back of the couch or something. Where is it you actually get the motivation to start to get all this picked up? It's very difficult, and we understand that. But again, taking yourself from the kitchen arena into somewhere like the sitting room, the lounge, you've got to make the same. Basically, got yourself sacked up as you would for any other event, and you've got to just say, right, let's get started. Get the sleeves rolled up. Let's start underneath the couch. Haul the couch back, and let's start there, hands and knees, and up each piece of each grain of rice, or each speckle of pearl barley or lentil. Just give it a quick dust down and straight back into Tupperware, and you'd be amazed how quickly you get through that process. It's all been good. We've got a huge number of callers that I've been trying to get through tonight. Apologies, the line's been extremely busy. I'm going to try and take a moment here just to mention a couple of callers and what they've talked about. We mentioned about the lady who's got the emergency vacuum cleaner she uses only for these purposes, and we've also got we've got this one here and just handed by the producer. I'm just trying to get my head around this one. I don't think we can use that one, I'm afraid. The producer says that yeah, it's okay. We can use that. There is a gentleman who called in, and when there's been a spillage of like sultanas, that's what he's been referring to in this call. If he does spill a bag of sultanas, split open and they've fallen on the kitchen floor or any floor, it doesn't say here, he just gets down and eats them. So he basically just gets down and eats them off the floor. Interesting. Let us know some more of how you cope in situations like this. Next week's show is going to be slightly different. We've got the full 8-week series, as I say. It's great to be back. I have to say, it's great to be back. It's been a while, but with the new setup on the show, where we're trying to amalgamate as much into the show, it's not been possible tonight because of the amount of information that had to be given out in regards to broth mixture spillage. But certainly, if you've been you feel you need some sort of counselling over this, we'll put up a number for that as well, because some people are adversely affected on matters when they've maybe come home from the supermarket, opened a piece of packaging, realising they can't take it back to the shop and they've got no one to turn to, particularly if they're on their own, and they've found that they've got lentils all across the hallway, and they maybe don't have anyone to assist them, and it's maybe a poorly lit area, and it may take winter time just now. It may well take until a bright sunny night before lots of the lentils or pearl barley actually become visible. So kind of like a pine tree, a fir tree at Christmas time, when you've got that erected in the corner of the lounge, and it's sitting there. I'm talking about a fresh Christmas tree, not an artificial one. And then several months later, thinking that all the pine needles have been vacuumed away, you still discover more and more in all strange places. I think I've actually found pine needles inside books and on top of the ceiling, and stuck to the ceiling. No idea why, but that's the story. We've got just a few seconds left, I'm afraid, on the show this evening. As I've just mentioned, the information that we've got for you tonight will be on our news board, which is available until the next show. And if you've been affected just by anything we talked about this evening, just access that message board and get the information that you need, and hopefully things will work out fine. As far as the soup is concerned, that was one thing that was handed by the producer there. yeah, we understand that you've maybe been looking forward to your plate of lentil soup, and you've not managed to get that together because of all the problems that you've incurred due to the spillage. It's a good idea, and probably why tin soup on occasions has its uses, and therefore it's not a bad idea to, at the back of the larder, just keep a small stock of tinned soup for these types of emergencies. Hopefully you don't have to use them all the time, but I'd hate to think that one load of broth on the floor, that would be it for, hopefully for quite a long time. I would hate to think that you'd have that as a reoccurring issue. If that was the case, I would suggest that you maybe try and arrange some assistance when it comes to opening the packages for broth mix and lentils, or indeed if you've got Tupperware, then you may well want to try and maybe invest in something entirely different. I'm just trying to think what would be useful. Perhaps maybe a one of those bird feeders that you use for sunflower seeds, for example, and there's just a small gap at the bottom, and you can maybe tip that forward. Even a plastic milk jug filled with broth mix, and then just pour that into the homemade broth to get it started into the boiling water to get that going. Hoping, of course, you don't knock over the jug and that goes on the floor and you're back to square one. You can see the problem, and you see why we've made that such an issue in tonight's programme. I'm afraid that's it. Time's gone again. We've actually overrun by a good 35 or 36 seconds, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop short there. And it's Randolph Waite here, bidding you a good night. We'll see you next week when we've got something else up for discussion. Good night.